Night settles over the forest in a way that feels less like darkness and more like a slow erasure. Leaves stop moving, wind loses its voice, and the narrow service roads threading through the wilderness become silent corridors where even headlights feel reluctant to shine. Every ranger knows that feeling. Isolation that isn't just physical, but existential. But deep inside that isolation, long after sundown, another kind of presence makes itself known. Not through shapes in the trees, not through movement on the trail, but through a single abandoned radio channel. Channel 19. A frequency the agency retired years ago, shut down, stripped from manuals, removed from official scans. Yet every ranger knows the same unwritten rule. You do not monitor Channel 19 after dark. You do not respond to Channel 19 after dark. And if it activates on its own, you do not acknowledge it. Tonight's episode traces 3 accounts, told years apart in different forests, by rangers who never worked together, yet all describing the same voice, the same coordinates, and the same impossible patterns hidden in the static. This is what Channel 19 broadcasts after sunset, and why rangers fear it more than anything else in the backcountry. Channel 19 was once ordinary, a maintenance channel, used for coordination equipment, mileage logs, nothing remarkable. But around 2004, rangers across several districts began reporting the same anomaly. The channel would activate by itself. Not during the day. Never when the station was busy. Only at night. Only when a ranger was alone. The first reports came from a veteran ranger named Douglas Hale in the Pacific Northwest. Hale wasn't prone to superstition. After 30 years of service, he trusted only what he could measure, touch, or record. But even he admitted the first night caught him off guard. He was finishing a trail inspection around 23:15 when his radio flickered in its cradle and emitted a burst of static, low, drawn out, like someone dragging metal across gravel. He ignored it until the static resolved itself into a voice. A man's voice, calm, too calm. Unit 6 copy. Hale froze, his hand hovering over the receiver. Unit 6 had been his call sign when he first joined the service, in 1987. No one had used that call sign in over a decade. The voice repeated, Unit 6 requesting confirmation. Hale didn't respond. He switched channels. Everything was quiet. He switched back to 19. And the voice whispered so softly it felt like breath against his ear. Douglas, please respond. His thumb lifted from the channel knob before instinct slammed it back down. He turned the radio off, tossed a sweatshirt over it, and drove back to the ranger station without looking in the mirror once. The next morning he told his supervisor what happened. She didn't react with disbelief or concern. She only said, You shouldn't have had 19 enabled. Remove it from your scan list. Hale frowned. But that's still unauthorized. It isn't, she interrupted. Not anymore. We're phasing it out. Don't use it again, and don't monitor it after dark. She said those last words with the mechanical certainty of someone reciting a memorized line. Hale later learned that every supervisor said the same thing, in the same tone, in every district. No one gave a reason. No one needed to. Over the next few years, dozens of rangers reported the same phenomenon. Channel 19 activating itself, voices addressing them by name, sometimes trying to give instructions, sometimes trying to ask questions, and sometimes simply breathing. The service officially retired the channel in 2011, yet radios still tune to it. And after dark, the channel still speaks. Most rangers follow the unwritten rule. Ignore it. Disable it. Pretend it doesn't exist. But not everyone learned soon enough. The second account, comes from Ranger Nicole Avery, a transfer from Colorado, new to her district, eager to prove herself, and completely unaware that Channel 19 was forbidden. Her first mistake was curiosity. Her second was compassion. It was early November, temperatures dropping into the 20s. Nicole was assigned to monitor the northern boundaries of her district, a routine night shift that kept her on the radio more than on the ground. At 22:03, her radio hissed softly. She didn't recognize the sound at first. It wasn't the usual static bleed from nearby towers. This was heavier, like something exhaling into the microphone. She glanced at the display. CH19, ACTIVE. She frowned. Channel 19 wasn't in her scan list. Before she could investigate, a voice broke through. "Any unit, please, need assistance." A male voice, weak, winded, pitched with panic. Nicole grabbed the receiver. "This is Ranger Avery. What's your location?" The reply came instantly. "Coordinates 43.8059-110.71. Nicole typed them into her GPS. The location was real. A fire road turnout, one she'd driven earlier that night. Her heart tightened. She keyed the mic again. "Copy! Can you describe your situation?" The voice fluctuated, distortion swelling and collapsing, like the signal couldn't find a stable frequency. "Hurt? Can't move. Please hurry." Then, almost too softly to hear, "I can see your headlights." Nicole jerked upright. Her truck headlights were off. She turned in her seat, scanning the tree line outside her windshield. Nothing. She forced her voice steady. "Sir, stay where you are. I'm responding." She didn't consider that the caller hadn't given a name, or a call sign, or the type of injury. She was thinking like a rescuer, not like a ranger who'd been warned. By the time she reached the fire road, the fog had thickened into a dense sheet, rising from the ground like smoke. Nicole slowed her truck. Her radio crackled again. "Almost there." She pressed the receiver. "Do you have visual on my vehicle?" Static exploded across the channel. Then, beneath it, "Yes." She shuddered. The fog thinned, revealing something on the road ahead. Not a person, not an animal, a shape, low to the ground, unmoving, facing her. Nicole braked. The shape didn't react. She leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. It looked like a body, face down, arms splayed. Only the arms weren't bent correctly. One was stretched far beyond human length, fingers splayed in the dirt like something had dragged it there. Her radio whispered, "Help!" But the sound wasn't coming from the figure. It was coming from behind her. Nicole whipped around. Nothing was there. She returned to the windshield. The road was empty. The figure was gone. But the drag marks remained. Long, deep, leading off the road and into the trees. Her radio clicked once, as if someone had squeezed the mic on their end. Then the voice whispered, right against the speaker grill, "You came!" Nicole shut the radio off so fast, she cracked the plastic housing. She reversed out of the turnout without taking her eyes off the tree line, even when branches scraped against the sides of her truck. When she returned to the station, she expected panic, reprimand, questions. She received none. Her supervisor just took the logbook from her and said, "You didn't monitor Channel 19. Write that down." Nicole stared at her. "You didn't monitor Channel 19, her supervisor repeated, sliding the logbook back across the desk. "And you won't again." The next day, her truck's radio was replaced without explanation. The following week, Channel 19 was wiped from her device entirely. But late at night, In the dorm rooms behind the station, Nicole could still hear the static. The same cadence. The same breathing. The same voice whispering, "You came." The third account isn't a story. It's a revelation. For years, rangers assumed Channel 19 carried a signal from a lost hiker, or a prank, or a rogue transmission bouncing off atmospheric layers, until a ranger named Jordan Watts uncovered the logs. These weren't official logs, not part of any public archive. They were stuffed into a mislabeled binder at an outpost that had been essentially abandoned for over a decade. Inside, he found handwritten accounts dating back to 1979. Different rangers. Different forests. Different decades. But every entry ended the same way. Contact made on Channel 19. Same coordinates. Same wording. Same voice. Watts noticed something else, too. As he read, he heard static leaking faintly from the portable radio clipped to his belt. He hadn't used Channel 19 in years. The channel wasn't even programmed. Yet, when he lifted the device, the display showed 19 ACTIVE. He didn't touch it, didn't speak, didn't breathe. The radio hissed softly. Then a voice he recognized, a voice he had heard before, years earlier, during his own encounter with Channel 19, whispered, "Jordan, you found it." Watts stared at the binder in his hands. He hadn't spoken his name aloud. He hadn't transmitted anything. The voice continued, "Do you see the pattern?" He didn't answer, but he did open the next page, and his blood stopped moving. The next entry wasn't old. It wasn't written decades earlier. It was new. Fresh ink. Dated 3 days in the future. His name was in the header. His call sign. His unit number. The entry described an incident he had not yet experienced. Ranger Jordan Watts responded to distress call on Channel 19 at 23:02. Coordinates identical to previous cases. Ranger never returned. Watts slammed the binder shut, heart pounding. His radio clicked again. The voice said, "You're late." He dropped the binder, snatched his keys, and drove out of the outpost without closing the gate behind him. He didn't return to that district. Didn't collect his belongings. Didn't file a transfer request. He simply vanished from the service. Not as a missing person, but as someone who refused to let Channel 19 predict his final entry. Other rangers later found the binder exactly where he'd left it. Only the entry with his name was gone. In its place was a blank page. White. Silent. Waiting. And on the radio rack in the corner, someone had switched the base unit on. Channel 19 hummed softly in the empty room, as if listening. As rangers compared notes over the years, patterns emerged. Patterns so consistent, they stopped being coincidence and started becoming something else entirely. Every account included the same coordinates, the same tone of voice, the same request for help, the same phrase, "Please respond," the same activation only after sunset, the same sensation of being watched after the transmission ends. But two patterns stood out above all. Time doesn't behave correctly on Channel 19. Rangers hear voices from people who haven't called yet, or from people who never existed, or, in the most chilling cases, from themselves, their future selves, their future distress calls, their future last words. And the second pattern, the voice learns. Over the years, it has grown more convincing. It uses current call signs, knows recent ranger transfers, knows updated terminology, knows what each ranger fears losing. It doesn't just mimic human speech. It mimics the speaker. Rangers who listen too long begin hearing the voice say phrases they once said out loud years earlier, phrases they barely remember saying. And, eventually, the voice begins sounding like them, perfectly like them. One ranger, years after leaving the service, was woken by her husband shaking her shoulders. She'd been sleep-talking, not in her voice, but in the voice from Channel 19, repeating coordinates, repeating call signs, repeating phrases she'd heard during her first encounter. When she checked her old logs, she discovered she had repeated an entire transmission word for word, a transmission made in 1996, before she was even born. Something had been waiting, echoing, replaying, learning, and it wasn't finished. Rangers submitted reports, filed documentation, recorded audio, logged timestamps. Headquarters offered the same response every time. Channel 19 is decommissioned. There is no signal to investigate. Except that wasn't entirely true. Hidden in the requisition records, the kind only supervisors see, are recurring orders for replacement antennas, backup relays, signal repeaters, frequency stabilization units, every one of them tuned specifically to the Channel 19 band. The frequency wasn't retired. It was being maintained, protected, preserved. For what purpose? Not even senior rangers know. Some believe the agency made a deal long ago, an unspoken pact with whatever resides in the static. Others believe the frequency became an accidental portal, a fracture point in time where voices bleed across decades. Whatever the truth, the prohibition stands. Do not monitor Channel 19 after dark, not to protect the rangers, but to contain what answers. Because if rangers engage, if they respond, if they follow the voice, the forest loses them, and the frequency gains something new to broadcast. Late one winter, during the quietest shift of the year, a senior ranger named Elias Boone was closing the station alone. He'd turned off the lights, locked the filing room, and walked the dark hallway toward the exit. His radio was off. He was sure of it. Yet, as he passed the radio desk, a soft static drifted across the room. He froze. On the desk, the base unit screen glowed faintly. Channel 19, active. Boone stepped closer. The static deepened. Then a voice whispered, "Please respond." But the voice wasn't unfamiliar. It was his. Not his speaking voice. Not his radio voice. His voice from a near-forgotten night 15 years earlier, when he'd been caught in a blizzard 2 miles from the station, convinced he wouldn't survive until morning. His final recorded transmission. A transmission that never reached dispatch due to interference. Boone stood motionless. The voice repeated, "Elias Boone coordinates. Please respond." Then, "I can see you." Boone reached forward, not to answer, but to turn the radio off. Before he touched the button, a second voice joined the first. Same pitch, same breath, same cadence. Another version of him. Then another. And another. A chorus of Boone's voices, whispering over each other. "Don't leave. Stay. Come back. Please respond. We're still here." Boone lunged forward and ripped the power cord out of the wall. The room fell silent instantly. But as he turned to leave, he heard one final whisper behind him. Not from the radio, from the dark doorway he had just passed. Elias. He left the station without finishing the shutdown checklist. He never worked alone again. Every ranger learned certain rules on their first day: how to treat hypothermia, how to recognize animal tracks, how to navigate without a compass, how to stay alive. But Channel 19 teaches a different lesson. Some places in the wilderness don't just isolate you. They listen. Some silences aren't empty. They're waiting. And some voices aren't calling for help. They're calling for someone new to answer. The official manuals don't mention Channel 19. The supervisors won't talk about it. The agency doesn't acknowledge it exists. But every ranger, every single one, follows the same unwritten rule. If Channel 19 activates after dark, you do not listen. You do not respond. You do not acknowledge the voice. Because anyone who responds becomes part of the transmission, and the forest remembers every voice it takes. Please respond.